Hey, Katie, I wanted to leave you some feedback on Essay 2. I'm sorry, Essay 3. I think that you have a good claim. I think it's a fine argument to make that you believe the girl does not go through with the abortion. Um, I do think you need a little bit of revision here with your thesis statement and your pivot away from the summary into the argument. Um, and so I think the paper starts off pretty strong um, in these first couple summary sentences, and I like the fact that you point out that that it's obvious that the girl doesn't want to go through with the procedure. Um, but I think one thing to address is that's not necessarily clear to the reader, right? Um, and so like this would be a good spot where you have a good idea, but it's a little underdeveloped. So what specifically does the girl do, right? To indicate that she doesn't see things the way that he does, right? So you say you can tell that, but the reader can't tell that unless you explain it to them, right? So in other words, you need to indicate how you interpret the girls to be resistant to the idea. Um, and I like these questions that you pose. I do feel like it gets a little disorganized when you say they are talking about if the girl should have an abortion or not. It seems like this idea should come up here when you first bring up the procedure. And I would try to condense your language here because they are talking about if the girl, right? That's a little too informal for this kind of paper. Um, and I feel like here, what is the conclusion, right? And then you come down here and you say, does the girl decide to have the abortion, right? It kind of feels like you're bouncing back and forth, so like you lose momentum in the paragraph here. So I think starting off with a broad summary, then pivoting to the idea of what is the conclusion and the idea that there's several logical outcomes, and then you ending with the specific outcome. I can see that you're trying to create a thesis with points, but uh, I'm not sure I follow this thesis with points yet. And so I would suggest that your thesis indicate, the most logical outcome is that she does not have the abortion. And then if you want to include a thesis with points, I think that you could. Uh, but I would argue that perhaps a very broad idea here. So she does not go through with the abortion because of, their inability to see eye to eye, their lack of communication, or quite possibly she's tired of the man's manipulation. And then you can allow these ideas to come up naturally as key ideas. So the introduction and the thesis needs some work for clarity, organization, and that thesis statement itself. I think that you're making fine claims in your paragraphs, but similar to this idea up here, you really need the evidence to support that. So when you say their words are like daggers and they do not agree, I would say do not agree on anything. I would give some evidence for that. Um, and then you say, and then the evidence that you do bring in, I think you need a little bit more explanation of the evidence to explain these conclusions. So if they are having a conversation about absinthe, how is that related to the baby, right? So I don't disagree with you, but you need to dig into the evidence more, if that makes sense. So the evidence that you've presented says absolutely nothing about the baby, right? The conclusion that you've reached. Even though I think you're interpreting it correctly, you just haven't explained it to the reader. So a reader unfamiliar with this text is going to go, what does absinthe have to do with the baby, right? So you as the writer have to do the hard work of making these connections for the reader. And I feel like you've, that's kind of been your pattern with each piece of evidence. I love the way that you set it up again. One of his best manipulative comments, and he's this amazing manipulator. I know you wouldn't mind it, Jig. It's not really anything. And then you say he knows that she's young and impressionable and probably scared, and he's using it to his advantage. Yeah, you're right. But the thing that you skipped is what he's really talking about here. So before you get to this conclusion, you need to explain why this statement is manipulative, right? So again, a reader unfamiliar with this text is going to be like, well, what is the it? What are they talking about, right? So you need to dig into the evidence and help the reader understand how you reach those conclusions. And I would follow that pattern, because that's going to help you reach the page length. So you're a page shy of the required length, and it'll also make your argument stronger. So I see a lot of promise here, but I do think another round of revision would help this thing quite a bit. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.